Hello, and thank you for accessing this Preservation 101 presentation on architectural review. My name is Bill Hover, and I'm the Tax Incentives Program Manager and Architectural Reviewer with the Historic Preservation Division. By now, I hope you've watched a lot of our terrific presentations already, and as a result, feel really excited about preservation in general, and can't wait to share this great information you've learned with neighbors, colleagues, relatives, and pets. Even so, I suspect you've still got a feeling that something's missing, and it happens to be that something you've been waiting for to leave you with a feeling of fulfillment. So I think it would be only natural for you to contemplate that mood and ask, what is architectural review? And what the heck does it have to do with historic preservation? Well, the term architectural review can be defined in a variety of ways. For HPD and the programs we administer, which I'll touch on a bit later, it's the formal evaluation process to determine the appropriateness of work impacting a historic resource, typically a building. Such work can be proposed or completed, and it includes exterior and interior projects. The work can be directly related to a historic building, such as a physical alteration, or it can be less directly related, such as having a visual impact, like new construction might. Sometimes it's all these things. Frequently, architectural review is the next step after determining a building is historic. But, as with many other processes, to evaluate something, you have to compare or measure it against something else, a benchmark of some sort. For our architectural review, this benchmark is the Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties, along with their associated guidance materials. The standards were developed to articulate the American preservation philosophy resulting from the Historic Preservation Act of 1966, and their direct applicability is for government programs. The Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties are composed of the standards for preservation, the standards for rehabilitation, the standards for restoration, and the standards for reconstruction. To illustrate this concept, let's picture a wagon wheel, like this one. How convenient. The hub of the wheel is the standards for the treatment of historic properties, and the spokes radiating out are the array of additional guidance and information about treating historic properties in an appropriate manner. Now I know that the standards are an incredibly fascinating subject, one where their nuance could be discussed for hours and hours, preferably at a cozy sidewalk cafe in a vibrant historic neighborhood, over a glass or two of wine, coffee, or other favorite beverage. Oh, but since that's probably not really ever going to happen, at the least, I'm going to introduce you to one of the spokes. Does that make me a spokesman? Anyway, the spoke I'm referring to is the standards for rehabilitation. But why this set? Because, by and large, most preservation projects fit rehabilitation's general definition of returning a property to a state of utility through repair or alteration, which makes possible an efficient contemporary use while preserving those portions and features significant to its historic, architectural, and cultural values. So since they're the ones most often called upon in actual use, they're also the ones generally being referred to when the standards are mentioned. However, we mustn't forget the other guidance materials, especially including the National Park Service's Preservation Briefs, which are articles that provide focused guidance on a variety of preservation subjects, such as masonry repair, window repair, plaster repair, and energy conservation for historic buildings, to name a few. The preservation briefs currently number 47 publications and are conveniently available online. But getting back to the standards for rehabilitation, these are 10 treatment principles based on a broad philosophical approach that emphasizes identifying and respecting historic properties as they've survived into the present. They provide basic guidance for appropriate treatment, which can be applied to a wide range of historic properties, from the simplest farm outbuilding to a house, to a small town commercial building, or even to an early 20th century high-rise. The essential concepts to grasp about the standards for rehabilitation are: find compatible, adaptive uses for historic properties, keep and repair historic features and materials, Avoid adding historic or historic-looking features when the property never had. If you have to replace a historic feature, use something new that matches. Avoid damaging treatments, and add new construction sensitively. I'd go into more detail just about the standards, but since we've limited time and I'm really here to talk about architectural review, everyone please take the opportunity to exercise their internet skills and download a copy of them so you can explore their wonders on your own. Oh, and one last bit about the standards. Because of legal considerations I don't even want to try to explain here, the state of Georgia and the Department of Natural Resources have their own set of standards. Fortunately, they are the same as the Secretary of the Interior's. Essentially, only the titles have been changed. Having laid out all this exciting background information, I'm sure you're now wondering what actually happens in an architectural review. Well, as I said before, architectural review is a formal part of several programs HPD administers, which have their own presentations, including our tax incentive programs for participating property owners doing historic building rehabs, our grants programs for local governments and nonprofit organizations doing preservation planning or building rehabs, and regulatory compliance under Section 106 environmental review that is done for government agencies. It's also inherent in the technical assistance service we provide, as time and resources allow, to just about anyone, citizen, business, or official, who asks. Simply put, for any of these programs, when we do an architectural review, we compare the work proposed or done to a historic building to the standards. Then we'd provide appropriate preservation guidance. Now, if I haven't confused you too much to this point, you'd probably guess, and be right, that this guidance would be based on the standards and their associated guidance. So how does this work? It's really pretty straightforward. If we see something in the work that isn't consistent with the standards, we make a comment about it. The comments may be general observations. They could be recommendations to make the work more consistent with the standards or improve the project, or they could be conditions assigned to the project to bring it into conformance with the standards. Your success participating in the programs we administer can depend on how you respond to the architectural review. We want and need you to meet the standards. Why? For Section 106 environmental review, not meeting the standards can result in an adverse effect assessment, which among other things could potentially prevent funding. For HPD administered grants, not meeting the standards can also jeopardize funding. And for the tax incentive programs, not meeting the standards can mean not getting the tax credit or property assessment freeze. Since technical assistance isn't a formal process, but still involves aspects of architectural review, just think of it as friendly guidance that intentionally happens to encourage consistency with the standards. On the other hand, our architectural review is really not about government control over what you do to your property. We leave that to codes, permitting, and zoning authorities. And we aren't intending that every project we review become a restoration of house museum quality. However, while I've just mentioned negative ramifications here, you should also understand that meeting the standards can be readily achieved, including for projects that also need to meet the criteria of other programs or permitting requirements. The majority of the many projects we see are successful. The secret to their success is incorporating the standards into a project's early design. Now, I can just tell you're thinking, this is some pretty exciting stuff. I need to know more. Get to the details about architectural review before I am overcome with anticipation. Well, let me break it down this way. We've got a 3-step evaluation system, and you can use it too when you're planning a preservation project. It goes like this. 1. Identify. 2. Assess. 3. Determine the appropriate treatment. For identification, we look for the historic visual and physical characteristics of a building, its character-defining features. This involves recognizing such aspects of a building as its shape, roof types, building setting, materials, craft details, arrangement of interior spaces, and architectural features. What we look for are exterior finishes and features like brick, or stone masonry, wood siding, decorative trim, windows, dormers, and historic additions. We also look for interior finishes and features like wood flooring, plaster, wainscot, beadboard, moldings, and distinctive floor plans. In assessment, we try to evaluate the condition of the different features. This is the building's physical checkup. Things like, does siding need repaired? Do windows need reglazed? Is plaster cracked or failing? Does brick mortar need repointed? Are there water damage issues? Are there structural or framing issues? Basically, we're looking at what you've got to deal with in your project. Then, for determining the appropriate treatment, we take the previous information into consideration and see how the rehab work compares to the standards. When we do this, generally we can divide work into 4 broad categories. First is maintenance, second is repair, third is replacement, and fourth is new construction, which, as I've listed them, is the order of the preferred, most preservation-sensitive treatment methodology. In other words, as you go down the list, each category has a greater impact or potential on impacting the historic building than the previous one. Anyway, as we compare the work with the standards, we're also looking to see where a particular work item reasonably falls within the categories. If it seems to be in one but should be in another category, what do? Well, we make a comment, recommendation, or condition. Get the idea? Sure you do. But now I'm pretty sure you're thinking again, what are architectural reviewers really looking out for? Well, there are certain building features and types of work that are pretty commonly addressed in rehabilitation and preservation projects, and which can also have significant impacts on the historic character of a property. As such, they're among the things we always try to stay alert for, the red flags that become second nature to us, or maybe more like one of those songs you can't seem to get out of your head. Anyway, here are some of those red flag items we always look for and act closely, intending that inappropriate treatments are caught and hopefully then avoided. Call it the Architectural Review Top 10 list. Coming in at number 10 is siding treatment. Fiber cement or hardy plank siding shouldn't be used to replace historic wood siding. Number 9, adding period ornamentation. Pretty as it may look, it's inappropriate to add gingerbread to a historic house that never had it. Number 8, atriums. Redevelopment of large mill or warehouse buildings often include atriums to bring light into interior spaces. The concern here is the degree to which they would remove historic materials and cause visual changes to the building's interior appearance. 7, major floor plan changes. Primary spaces, such as front rooms and halls, generally should be left spatially intact. Major changes should be limited to rear and secondary spaces. Number 6, new additions and new construction. Additions should always be located and designed so they are as unobtrusive as possible and do not dominate the historic portion of the property. They also should be clearly identifiable as new work. Number 5, masonry treatments. Brick should never be sandblasted or high-pressure water blasted. These treatments remove their glazed surface, which cannot be restored, and leave the brick vulnerable to further deterioration. Additionally, repointing mortar for pre-1920 buildings should generally avoid use of Portland cement in their mixes. Portland cement mortar that is stronger than the adjacent brick promotes stress relief in the brick rather than the joint. This is not a desirable situation, as it's easier to repair mortar than replace a cracked or spalled brick. Number 4, replacement of missing features. Historic features that have been previously removed, especially storefronts, porches, or other front facade features, should be replaced as authentically as possible, based on photographic or other documentation. And coming in at a 3-way tie for number 1 is replacement of historic windows. Yes, Virginia, despite cries to the contrary, in most cases they really can be fixed. And they should be. not only because of the historic character they contribute to a property, but because when they are, they'll last. Consider that often they've already survived 80 or 100 years or even longer, with little or no attention because of the natural durability of the materials they were made from, especially if you take care of them with a bit of regular maintenance. Historic windows can also be made energy efficient. With appropriate repair, weather stripping, and added storm windows, historic windows can achieve equivalent efficiencies to that provided by modern thermal glazed windows. Also tied for number 1 is treatment of plaster. Plaster is another durable, quality historic material that is readily repairable. It is also like an indicator species in that its condition can provide clues to hidden problems like a leak, structural deficiency, or foundation settlement. While selective replacement of plaster may be necessary to correct these problems, the context is not that the plaster has failed, but that the source problem has caused the damage. Yet often plaster is targeted for wholesale removal because it has gone bad without figuring out the reason or extent of the damage, and sometimes just to expose a brick wall for decorative purposes. And finally, demolition. Once a historic building is gone, it's gone. Lost is the character it contributed to its neighborhood. Lost is the opportunity it could have provided as part of revitalization, along with its embodied energy that new construction might replace, if it happens. And, not to forget, the landfill waste volume it represents. Demolition should always be carefully considered. As a case in point, Donovan Ripkema, the prominent preservationist and expert on rehabilitation as part of economic development, tells the story of a proposed development in downtown Lexington, Kentucky, where 14 or so historic buildings were demolished a few years ago to clear several city blocks for a major new development. To date, no work has started, and it appears it won't. The result? An active commercial district lost and replaced with a large, fenced, downtown vacant lot. So, what final bits of wisdom can I impart to you about getting a good architectural review? Can you believe there's more? Well, not really. It's just a final summarization. When anticipating the rehabilitation of a historic building, you should first understand the way it was meant to function and avoid the type of work that inevitably impacts that function. It could have unforeseen but predictable consequences. Second, understand and appreciate the benefits of retaining existing materials and features. They have stood the test of time. Third, understand there is no such thing as maintenance free. Fourth, understand that gutting and doing wholesale replacement of materials and features utilizing new materials to create a historic look is not rehabilitation. Fifth, remember the standards are your friends, so apply them when you are planning a project. Sixth, be aware that a rehabilitation project may entail a variety of other reviews and approvals that can include local preservation commissions, zoning boards, and building permit departments. Their requirements are probably different from ours because they have different authorizations and agendas. Don't go thinking that approval by one or more implies approval by all. Also, be aware that there are preservation professionals out there that can probably help you with your rehabilitation project. So, if you need some hands-on guidance, find one. If you don't know where to start, try the consultants directory on our website. And finally, go ahead, indulge yourself, check out these websites. Thank you.